Okay, dear friends, thanks for coming. It's the concluding lecture of this four-part series, and I so much hope that we'll be able to create some good vibrations in the course of today. It seems to me there are some new people here that haven't been here before, so keeping also that in mind. At the same time, of course, there are people that you might have met during the previous lecture. So let me suggest that we would take here some 50 seconds in order to generate a tender and dynamic moment of meeting. So please stand up and generate appropriate power hugs and cheek kisses and whatnot. I think I'd like to be in this this first part perhaps a bit more personal than in some of the other lectures, in terms of perhaps drawing from some quite personal experiences. It's I think the idea of harmony as some kind of resonance that one experiences as positive, that inspires me quite a lot. It's of course in music. In my youth, I quite liked the band Beach Boys, and quite generally speaking, this kind of idea, mamas and papas, that you would have several people singing something different at the same time, but it somehow creates something beautiful. It's an idea that if you bring that towards your own experience, could perhaps with the help of words facilitate some harmonies that in a sense already exist, but you just haven't perhaps brought them together, those distinct elements, but you could bring them together. And if you did bring them together, those distinct elements, maybe they wouldn't look so distinct. I mean, the idea I here have in mind relates to the following quite powerful experience I had in 2011. The father of my special lady, the Queen, Pipsa, and Pipsa, as I think I've said earlier, is from Lapland, and the climate in Lapland it's really quite harsh, and I mean you can have minus 30, minus 35, minus 40 degrees Celsius in the winter time, and it is really quite in many ways extraordinary area, and Pipsa's father lived all his life up in Lapland, and he was sort of a northern Chen master as far as I'm concerned. He hadn't had any real formal schooling, but I would say that anybody that met him was somehow elevated. So you could say that some kind of resonance started to take place as you met Onni Kaihua, Pipsa's father. He passed away in 2011, and the funeral was quite beautiful. Also, this little phenomenon that you have up north, that when the deceased is brought along his or her final journey, and you drive in the cars following the car in which the corpse is. It could be that somebody comes from the opposite direction. I mean, just normal roads. But what happens is that this opposing car, when noticing the funeral procession, stops by the road. So it's sort of like you don't know the person. You just sort of signal your awareness of a majesty. And also what's done is that very often the person who is about to be buried is brought for the last time to his or her home. So the car came to that little yard. Of that little house. That Pipsa's father had built after the war. To that yard that already had seen a house, but all the houses of the entire Lapland were burned as the German troops withdrew. So one of the houses that had been burned was the house to which Pipsa's father had been born. But he built a new house after the war. So it's that yard that the cart came, and then the coffin is opened, and everybody has the chance to say what you want to say, or just in the presence of your loved one more time. Now, Pipsa had the idea that as this happens and everybody has paid their respects, we would play something. And we discussed what might that something be. And I said, how about Finlandia? And it's so dear to Finns. How about Finlandia? And Pipsa said, well, I don't think so. I mean, father was so unassuming. It's as it were too big. He wouldn't have worn it. Something that would, in a sense, paint the wall with such huge colors as is Finlandia. But maybe, she said, maybe the chorus part. Maybe the chorus part. So we listened to the chorus part, and thought that this is appropriate. So I had the chorus part of Finlandia ready. Also, I had brought little loudspeakers, and out we were there in the yard. It was January. It was beautiful snow, and I put the Finlandia chorus part on, and it played so beautifully there. But as it was coming towards its end, it suddenly struck me that is it possible that as it ends, something comes out? I mean, for instance, Roll Over Beethoven, or Help by Beatles. Something could come out all of a sudden if I'm not careful enough. So I went and stood by the computer so as to be able to stop it at the right moment. And as I'm there waiting to pause it at the right moment, as we come to close with the song itself, all of a sudden I hear this enormous noise. I mean, enormous noise. And this is Lapland. I mean, you don't hear enormous noises. So all of a sudden there was this enormous noise, and what happened was that just at the moment as this chorus part of Finlandia that we played in honor of Pipsa's father came to an end, a fighter plane flew over us. Now, you could say, if you were there experiencing this, it was something you never forget. This is a man of 3 wars. He was in Winter War, he was in Continuation War, he was in the Lapland War. And of course, it's a complete coincidence that one particular fighter plane from the Lapland forces happens to be exercising and happens to fly fairly down and happens to fly over a particular spot at a particular moment. It's a complete coincidence. But still, in terms of the experience, completely meaningful as far as I'm concerned. So it's this harmony that the event and something we felt about, as we called him, Superukki, Pipsa's father felt. I mean, it somehow was just so beautiful. It's a possibility that we have to sort of find such, you could say, connections maybe. Also perhaps listening to where you might hear the something as quite a bit more subtle. Of course, in this case, nobody could bypass the experience because the fighter plane went so near us. I mean, the noise is enormous. The beautiful winter landscape. This special moment of Pipsa's father being there for the last time. But it could be that in many other contexts, the harmony is quite a bit more subtle. It sort of requires the use of attention, the use of your sensibilities to observe it, particularly if you think about maybe of helping the harmony come out better in the future. It could be maybe it's just not in place yet. If you look at some of the documents of, let's say, the making of Pet Sounds, perhaps the greatest album of the Beach Boys, or if you look at the good vibrations, it's so hard to find the right harmony. But the possibility is there. I mean, think about it this way. And now I offer a completely different example, but please follow me with this. Although it might seem strange why I picked this up. Years back, I started to explore infant research. The reason why I was interested in infant research was because it seemed to me interesting a phenomenon as to what happens in the interaction between an infant, a baby, a newborn, and his or her mother. And also from the point of view of the fact that clearly whatever is happening in a dimension that doesn't reduce to the conceptual. Remember, as a philosopher, it's natural for me to believe that almost everything that really counts can be captured by concepts. So I was looking for phenomena that clearly can't be captured by concepts. So the interaction between the baby, the infant, the newborn, and the mother was a case in point. So I studied infant research. Now, at the same time, perhaps my crown jewel effort for the past 20 years or more has been what I've called, or come to call, the Paphos seminar on Cyprus, which I've been running now since '95. I've had 49 such seminars of 1 week, and it's I think it's a great context for people to find harmonies, and also between people, because many of the disharmonies that come from our thinking don't have such a strong say in that context. So for instance, the fact that somebody is older than you, or somebody is younger than you, or has some other kind of obvious difference with you isn't potentially that big a source of a disharmony in the Paphos seminar context. Now, to some extent, of course, that's what we've, I think, experienced here as well. And that, of course, has been one of the intentions, to try to create, as we first called it, a campfire, where perhaps people could approach one another with the kind of openness that would, using this terminology, create possibilities for harmonies. You know, you would hear something differently because the other one is singing at a different voice, or a different, starting from a different point of the scale. But in the Paphos context, this happens very strongly. So one couple came there that had difficulties to get a child. But in the Paphos context, they did manage to put the child, you know, in motion. So I heard about this later on, that, you know, this Paphos baby has been born. And I was very happy, you know, very excited. And then I'm one day in Cafe Engel. This is a nice cafe at the Senate Square. So I'm there at Cafe Engel at the Senate Square reading one of the key researchers of infant research that I like particularly much, Beatrice Beebe from Columbia University. So one of my favorite writers in this dimension, really insightful, and such a strong researcher, and so wise. You know, there's that warmth about Beebe that I like also, in terms of the way she writes. Also a systemic outlook. She uses the concept of a system to describe what happens between the baby and his or her mother. Anyway, so I'm reading there. Beebe, one of my favorite writers on infant research. And in comes the father of the Paphos baby, clearly with the Paphos baby, whom I hadn't seen, but here is Yuri, the father with the baby, so I conclude it's the Paphos baby. This is great. And Yuri is such a great guy anyway. So Yuri is a good friend, so he comes with the baby, and they come to my table, and we start to talk. But I had just been reading BB's one of key articles. I'm very excited. So I start to describe to Yuri, who's a brilliant guy, and always enthusiastic to learn of new openings. So I start to describe some of the key points of BB's paper I'd just been reading. And there's the Paphos baby, like these babies are, checking out the scene, bimbeli bum kind of thing. And so he's there checking the scene, the baby style bimbeli bum approach, very much engaged. And I'm explaining the key points of infant research. And what happened was that the baby there, who was looking at the scene, all of a sudden fixed his attention on me. It's almost like he was thinking, hey, this guy is making sense. I had underestimated these adults. So I mean, it was quite clear that his attention was focused upon me, and there's a moment of this kind of sync, this kind of attunement, this sort of connectivity. Sort of, you could say, harmony. Something happened between the two of us that hadn't happened 10 seconds previously. And you could say, well, isn't that what mothers try to do all the time? And in fact, do succeed to do all the time with these babies. Finding this sync, finding the rhythm of the baby, somehow connecting with the baby. I mean, the baby doesn't really have that many possibilities to create the connection from his or her end. For one thing, he or she can't really control his or her movements. And also, he or she can't express in verbal form some of the desires for connectivity. But surely he or she can do a lot of other things. And it's that reservoir that was there in place, and this is to me interesting. This kind of possibility a human being has at a very early age, in the dimension of, you could say, brilliance. This is brilliant. In fact, when you look at the universe, not that many creatures have this kind of brilliance. For instance, of using your eyes to create rhythm, or recognizing with the very, very sort of marginal voices you make, still a sync. It's sort of maybe recognizing when the breathing is in some sense in sync. So it's this, you could say, infantile system that might still be in place in you. Of course, if you have a system in place, you can use the system more intelligently or less intelligently. Less intelligently would be, for instance, not really using it, or not paying attention to the fact that you have the kind of subsystem. I mean, you can exploit some parts of yourself, and we know that this is what people tend to do, that you just don't pay attention to something. So you don't take attention You don't take that much, let's say, use of your ability to smell something, for instance, or taste, really, because you're intellectually oriented. So tasting something isn't for you a realm that you should, in your opinion, explore. But attunement, ability to connect subconsciously on some very deep emotional level to other people would seem to be, you could say, this is a minimal point, would seem to be a potentially useful resource for teamwork. And given the fact that you can't really imagine yourself as contributing the way you could contribute if your abilities for teamwork are ill-developed, it would seem that this would be a sub-case that somebody might want to pay attention to, the way you attune. But it also means, from the point of view of anybody you meet, that this other person also has these abilities. Maybe something you could do, very, very small change from your point of view, from your angle, might help the other one to attune. So maybe trying to find the sync. Like the infant does what you did originally. But now in settings where you can also use your other subsystems, like your thinking, your verbalism, your ability to go to the meta level, your ability to employ what we call System 2 using Kahneman's way of conceptualizing things. So you should sort of reflect on things. And then you might pose yourself the challenge to grow in a particular dimension. That being one of the resources you have, you can sort of pose yourself a challenge. This is where I should grow. Leads me to my third example. When our boys started their high school, our twin boys, and as I said during a previous lecture, we have just the twins. It's a lot, but just the twins, so they have dominated our life quite a bit, the boys. And from my point of view, the birth of the boys and raising them up was just, it was so meaningful, obviously, so significant, so fabulous, but it's also was demanding and also had implications regarding how the special lady saw me. And unlike Pipsa's father, I'm a man of big ego. I like to have the center stage position. Okay, so I'm married, in love with an incredible lady. I like to be in the spotlight, but when you have twins and you're the father, you're not in the spotlight. I mean, you're there in a side position, sort of a supporting cast kind of position, and this lasts for quite some time. It's not 1 year, it's not 2 years. I mean, it lasts for quite some time because the mother is focused upon the twins. And this is how it should be. It's good when you, from the meta level, reflect upon it. But very often, in the immediate situations, I wasn't able to take the meta level. So given the fact that the boys, when starting high school, clearly were more and more independent, and more life taking place that didn't require her attention, that meant a chance for me to announce, I'm back. So, the new year of the first year of the boys' high school was remarkable. I felt that, a new era is here. And to highlight that was the fact that the boys went to their own New Year's party, which meant that we couldn't go, Pips and me, to any party because we were so nervous of their party. We just sort of stayed at home, standby, waiting for the boys to call us so that we could go and collect them from the party. Because obviously you couldn't trust getting a taxi, and obviously taking a bus was out of the question. New Year's night. So we stayed home, and then the phone rings. We went to get the boys. We returned home, and the party had been a tremendous success. The boys were very excited, and I'm excited because I feel new era is here, and I'm so excited. It's maybe 1:30 or so, and the boys are getting ready to go to the bed. But I'm so excited, and I say to the boys, what would you say are my key weaknesses? I put forth this question. I was so elevated that I was ready for this kind of discourse. So I said to the boys, what would you say are my key weaknesses? And Oliver said, well, a little bit hot-tempered. And Jerome continued and said, well, perhaps a little bit moody. And I thought to myself, probably pretty accurate. Then I said, is there anything else? To which Oliver, who was the first one to speak, replied by getting out from the little room in which he was undressing. So he got out from there, looked straight at me and said, well, if you can make some headway in these two respects, that already would be a major breakthrough. And of course you could say, yeah, that's possible when you think about it. That you can sort of move ahead with something that in a sense isn't necessarily on your agenda, because it could be that you have become accustomed to yourself as relatively moody. And you might have rationalistic reasons for the fact that you are a little bit moody. You know, I'm sort of an artist. You know, I have to put myself as a whole human being with my emotions and affects everything, the things that I do, it sort of takes its toll. With the result, I'm a little bit moody. You know, many artists are moody. Or it could be, yes, I'm a little bit hot-tempered, but that's because, you know, I want to be passionate about what I'm doing. So I could have all kinds of meta-level rationalizations for these two features of mine that when put together as aggregates, you know, all those separate behaviors put together as aggregates and brought to the level of just one expression, moody or hot-tempered. From the point of view of the 15-year-old, the 16-year-old son of mine, seems that, you know, if daddy would be making progress in this particular dimension, you know, that would be so good to everybody. Not only to me, not only to my brother, not only to mommy, not only to our family, to himself. I mean, everybody would win. But it would require for him himself to want to grow in this respect. And this is really, you could say, interesting. You can find this kind of resonance with a theme sometimes that starts to sort of carry to the future, the resonance. So it's not only that you sort of look at a theme and it's a theme outside of you and you evaluate the theme. You try to find this attunement with, let's say, the theme of hot-temperedness. And surely this is possible. But it would require you to activate yourself through systems that you might not feel that excited about now. Because it could be that you are so excited about your conceptual realm, your analytical capabilities, all kinds of things that you can objectify, that you tend to sort of push aside, let's say, your more infantile dimensions, although, of course, they do exist. I mean, think about it this way. Here's a book that more than 20 years ago made a big impression on me. Also because it happened to come to my notice at a time when the environment for the potential resonance was in place, because I was traveling for Nokia, and this was Nokia's miracle years. Nokia was going upward so strongly in the late 90s. So I was traveling for Nokia, given Nokia presentations in Asia. And this was a big thing for me. I hadn't done that kind of thing ever before. And never before had a company like Nokia emerge from my country. This was incredible. So, I think it was from Singapore airport, I picked up this book, Howard Gardner, Leading Minds. And read that. I remember reading it, for instance, at the Hong Kong airport. And anyway, I like this kind of open the book somewhere kind of reading, where I don't necessarily commit myself to reading the entire book. I just open up the book and believe that the book opens in the exactly right place. So I look at the book as a kind of a pass, and I'm the goal maker. So let the paragraph that your eyes happen to land on give you a pass kind of reading. It's something that I've been doing for quite some time anyway. It's perhaps not the best way to prepare for examination. But it's possible if you are not reading because of an examination, but because of your life. I mean, you might want to become enriched by something. So you sort of test out a resonance. You test out a sync. You know, would this perhaps sound something nice? So I read Gardner's book, and I had admired him already by that time, and he's one of the most referred to writers when it comes to, you could say, humanistic scholarship, the father of the multiple intelligences view, for instance. He's such a beautiful writer. I really admire Gardner. He has this kind of outlook that aims at something more synthetic, as opposed to just something more sectorized. So in this book, among other things, Gardner offers the perspective to the effect that this is Gardner saying the following line: when I've looked into leadership literature, one of the themes that doesn't get the kind of attention that I believe it should get is the mind of a 5-year-old. Which to me is an exciting perspective. You know, maybe it is the case that when it comes to the phenomenon of leading or being led, and of course all of us are led, you know, something influences us, and sometimes we manage to influence other people. Maybe something of that phenomenon of being led or leading takes place in this realm of us as a 5-year-old, in terms of the cognitive structures. And of course, those structures still exist. You know, it could be that you make a story. That's one possibility. You make a story out of something, and it's powerful for you to story. For instance, it's well known in this country, maybe it's done elsewhere as well, that sometimes the Air Force pays the ultimate homage it can pay, which is that it performs what's known as the overflight, ylilento. So they perform an overflight. And this is such an honor. You could say, well, did that kind of a thought resonate immediately in everybody that were there in Pipsa's father's yard the last time he was there? I would say it did. But not only then, it's been going on within me since then. I mean, you have subsystems. One of the subsystems, you could say, is your infantile ability to attune and your desire to attune, your sort of passion to attune. But you also have yourself as a 5-year-old that is excited about stories, excited about narratives. But it could be that some of the stories, some of the narratives don't really support you in terms of the overall picture that you might want to carry out in the dimension of your entire life. But surely you have here possibilities by first becoming aware of this, you could say, reservoir of yourself as a 5-year-old. Now, with all this in mind, let me now show you a little video. And this is going to be less than 2 minutes. And it's also going to be, we have quite a lot of non-Finns here, so I want to, as a Finn, give some sort of cultural education also here. So we'll look at Finnish ice hockey for a moment. And it's going to be a clip from a game. You don't have to understand what the commentator is saying. He's speaking Finnish, and you could say is somewhat biased for Finns, which is understandable given the context. But then one of the players that was there on ice comes to comment on what just happened. One of our foremost players, and I've inserted subtitles so you can follow his description regarding what happened. So let me show you this about 2-minute video cut. It starts out in a situation where the opposing team is penalized for 2 minutes. So they're playing with just 4 players in the field, and Finns have full power. But because there's only 55 seconds to go, what the Finnish team does is that we take the goalie out so that we get an additional 6th player. And it's a risky move, but you can make such a risky move if you believe that you can hold on to the puck. And the players that you have there from the Finnish side are some of our all-time greats. So there are, there's this great honor that some player who has played in the national team, you could say the greatest honor you can have in that dimension is that the number with which you played is frozen. So nobody's going to play with that number again if you are one of the greatest of the great. So we have 3 such players there. And there are 6 such players altogether in the history of Finnish ice hockey. So there is, you could say, real all-stars from the Finnish side. So let's take a look at this and then I'll analyze it. Okay, now if you think about this goal as one of the players that was on the field remembers it, and the player we saw there talking, he's one of the, you could say, most generous players Finland has seen. Is well known for the fact that he's so unegoistical and such a great guy. And the way he starts to conceptualize his memory starts, as we just saw, by him saying that, well, we were doing the goal there with Saku. This is one of our greatest players, number 11, whose number is frozen also, as is Helminen's number. So it was Saku, and it was Jere Karalahti, also a legendary defense player. We were doing the goal. First of all, he doesn't envision the situation from his own point of view, although he was the one that actually did give the pass. Also, at the earlier situation, it was him that passed the puck quite masterfully to Teemu Selänne on the left side. This is something that Teemu Selänne, who is a right, likes to do in this kind of situations. He plays on the left, because then it's easier to shoot more quickly if you get a pass across the ice, as he does get. So it might have been a goal, but even that pass was given by Helminen. But Helminen isn't emphasizing himself. Instead, he's emphasizing the others. In particular, he's emphasizing Jere Karalahti, who is the guy, the defense player, that actually does do the goal. And it's a great shot by Karalahti. So the way he remembers Helminen it is by saying, when Saku started to drift towards the blue line, Karalahti, who is a defense player, left the blue line and very masterfully sought out that spot to which spot I was then able to pass the puck and Karalahti shoot the goal. So it was very much to Jere's credit. And this is interesting because if you look at it more closely, you can see that actually Karalahti isn't moving masterfully to that spot. Instead, he is there in that spot throughout the whole episode. So in fact, Helminen is vastly overemphasizing Karalahti's brilliance in this particular instance. He's number 42, so he has the puck here in the beginning. So he goes back to his defense position to the blue line, but then when our goalie goes out, notice him, number 42, who's the one that actually then does the goal, move to where he will be and stay throughout the whole episode. Watch out. So that's Karalahti there now. That's Helminen. There's Selänne. Now our goalie gets out, and here you can see that Karalahti is there, 42, at his normal position at the blue line. As you can see, he moves there. So this is where he will be throughout the episode. That's Helminen. That's Koivu, Timonen, Koivu, Helminen. And now, notice here Helminen passes the puck to Teemu Selänne on the left. Teemu Selänne has made so many goals from that particular position. I mean, he's so good, and the pass is excellent, but it's like in ice hockey, sometimes you just don't make it. But it's a great pass by Helminen there. Timonen, Koivu, back to Timonen, and then notice here how Koivu shoots, and then Timonen gets it back. This is now where the goal actually happens. Here is Karalahti, who's the player who's going to shoot it in. But what happens here is that here is sort of a shadow figure. The shadow figure is the guy who was on the defense line, but has left the defense line. He has estimated that there is, well, maybe at the moment he left the defense line, there was 8 seconds to go. So he calculates, okay, 8 seconds to go. I can leave the blue line. Our goal is completely open now, but I'm going to block the defense guy here so that Karalahti will have extra space to do the goal. And watch as it happens. So there is Timonen, the other defense player who has come from the blue line to block the defense player, and in it goes. But it's very hard to see this happening. I mean, it's astonishing that if you think about something that you could say is relatively simple, ice hockey. I mean, you might have 4 players, 5 players, 6 players. They're on the ice from one team, and a goal is made. You can say this is relatively easy to see, what actually happens. And I had shown this for several years, this video, in order to emphasize how beautiful it is from the part of Helminen, the player who was on ice, number 14, who is such a generous player, to overemphasize the role of Karalahti, the defense player that actually does make the goal, instead of emphasizing his own role, although his role is so clearly vital there. And of course, you could say, well, when it comes to the activity like, let's say, football, everybody's excited of the players that make the goals. Because you don't really have to be into the game itself that deeply, to appreciate somebody who makes a goal. Ronaldo, it's Messi. You want to see them make goals. And this is what people talk about. And it's also something that institutionally is very, very carefully looked upon, also in retrospect. So you have these Excels in place that also after the event emphasize the significance of something. So many goals so far in the regular season by such and such. And this is a celebrated dimension. And the fact that it is celebrated means that, you want to be there. And everybody understands that, if the concert is great, the conductor must have succeeded tremendously. Also because it's sort of easy to look at this one person as opposed to 100 persons that make the orchestra. So who directed film so-and-so? So you look at the one somebody who was in the leading role. So who was the CEO during Nokia's miracle years? So it's understandable that when we conceptualize things, when we perceive things, when we contemplate on things, when we also in our own case seek out something that is valuable, we do so on the basis of some understanding regarding what's valuable. But some aspects of the valuable are more conspicuous than other aspects of the valuable. So in the case of ice hockey, players that make goals are that dimension where the biggest stardom always is. But there's also the support star level. These are those players that feed the goal-making star. And in most cases, it's relatively easy, but not quite as easy as on level 1. It's almost as easy to figure out, well, who made the pass. You might have to go back and play back it from a video. But there are methods to figuring out who was the one that actually made the pass. But that requires some effort. But again, this is something that excels, as I would put it, support. So you have this feedback mechanism that after the event emphasizes the significance of somebody because this is the person who has made so many passes in so many games, let's say. But the really interesting thing from our point of view is this category 3. Category 3 is creating the space, enabling the possibilities, placing the seed, nurturing what then happens in categories 1 and 2. But this is very difficult to see. So even in case of ice hockey, where the whole thing is there right in front of your eyes, you just don't see it. As I said, I've used this particular video for years. And very often it happened here in Finland that I would have in the audience big ice hockey fans, ex-players, coaches, people that are really heavily into ice hockey. But not once anybody came that would have pointed out to me, Esa, this was a really powerful, really great example. That's exactly how Helminen is like, but there's one detail there that you might want to pay attention, and that's the role of Timonen. It's Timonen that in fact creates the space for both Karalahti and for Helminen to do what Karalahti then most conspicuously does. Nobody came to point this out. It's difficult to see. Even in the case of something as, you could say, trivial as ice hockey. I mean, trivial in the sense that if you think about your life, you could say it's much more complex. Now, in some cases, you realize that, teacher so-and-so gave you such and such. So that's category 2. So you were able to do whatever you did because teacher so-and-so taught you such and such. Or you were in a teamwork with student so-and-so, and the student so-and-so brought in something that you wouldn't have had he not been there, and that helped you to win the whatever competition perhaps was. So in some cases, it's very easy to sort of observe, at least in retrospect, what you got from something if the doing is sufficiently closely related to when you got to something. And in a sense, using this terminology of good vibrations, of resonance, or being in sync, you could say, well, if the sound with which you're supposed to sync is close enough, you can sort of make the connection. Yeah, yes, these two are in sync. Here we have a harmony. But still something made all that possible. And it's that category 3 that to me is so interesting. I'm thinking more and more the kind of thoughts that you could say somebody at an earlier stage probably wouldn't have thought. If somebody has read, like I have read, thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, all kinds of materials, all kinds of books, I've read for so long, it's natural to ask at the age of 64, was it worth it? Given the fact, and this is a fact, that de facto I have forgotten most of it. I have enormous library. And some of the books I haven't read, some of the books I have read, there are parts of the book I have read in some cases, but most of everything I've read, I've forgotten. So it's natural to ask, was it worth it? Now, of course you could say, well, if it's the case that the connection to something you do and is worthy is sufficiently obvious, you can say, yeah, reading that particular book, let's say Gardner's Leading Minds, I clearly remember the moment at Hong Kong airport when this point struck me that this is amazing. I never thought such a thought that myself as a 5-year-old would be a key concept through which to understand some of my behaviors when it comes to me being influenced. So it could be that in some cases you can trace back where the past came from. But in many cases, you can't do it, and still you did get something that made possible you receiving the past. So, category number 3, I mean, if you think about this just from this perspective, why read books? I mean, you have the internet. Why read books? You could say, well, what does it mean that you have the internet? Well, it means that when you have an issue, when you have a problem, you can check the internet for possible answers, possible sort of enlightening perspectives on the whatever it is that your mind is occupied by. So you are looking for, from the position of potential category 1 level contribution, passes, that is contributions already in the net from the category 2 level. And you might say, well, this is a possible way to lead one's life. You just wait for the occasion to arise, and then you sort of check for the possible passes, but internet is so vast, there are all kinds of passes all the time available. Why read books? It takes time to read any book. And you know, it's just one perspective anyway. You know, Gardner's Leading Minds, you know, just one perspective of leadership. It was published more than 20 years ago. Surely more research has already been conducted that is relevant for the themes, whatever they are he discusses. And the answer why read books is because your category 3 is worth nurturing. But the catch is you don't know what the benefits are. It might be difficult to observe the benefits even afterwards. And why is it so difficult to observe the benefits even afterwards? Because most people forget everything they read. Because your memory also works very much using these different layers. Only certain layers of your memory can pick up the past. But that doesn't take away some of the things that maybe was put as a seed years previously, with the result that you can sense something as significant, as meaningful, as having depth, as you feeling the resonance within yourself with something that is deeper. I mean, I'm a philosopher, and philosophy, of course, is sort of a strange discipline if you consider it as a discipline, because there really isn't a subject matter. So if you study biology, if you study physics, you know, mathematics, there is a subject matter. But in philosophy, there really isn't a subject matter apart from, you could say, the history that has been generating books and conceptualizations and contributions that are called philosophy. But that's not really the subject. I mean, surely those are secondary. Surely the idea was something different as compared to just generating books. So legitimizing philosophy in the dimension of reading books, why read a philosophy book? You know, it's so abstract. It's difficult to apply to anything because it is so abstract. Very often what philosophers do is that they create their own conceptual world. But because it's their own conceptual world, the connection to your so-called real world might be quite remote. But the fact that the connection is remote doesn't mean that it wouldn't be dramatically relevant in some situation, potentially. And it also doesn't change the fact that as a human being, you have this kind of capability of the dimension 3, vis-a-vis yourself and also vis-a-vis people around you. I mean, you can feed other people, you can care for other people. I mean, if you think about your mother, one can say, well, what's the color of the eyes of your mother? Now, if the color of the eyes of your mother is some conspicuous color, which is the case in some cases, let's say brown, or here in Finland, sometimes somebody has really strikingly blue eyes. It's easy to remember what somebody's eyes are, the color of it, if it's a striking color, but in many cases the color isn't that striking. It's sort of in between. It's sort of grayish, maybe a little bit blue, maybe green. You know, it's nothing as it were that you can easily name. But still, the eyes that have affected you more than any other eyes are the eyes of your mother. I mean, I remember one time I was in Cafe Egberg. This is and has been very close to where we live. Unlike Cafe Engeland, which I mentioned earlier, it's further away. But Cafe Egberg is very close to where we live. So I often still patronize it, and we've been doing it for years. So I was there once with my mother. Then my mother all of a sudden said, "Why are you staring at me?" And I said, "Because I suddenly realized that you have given birth to me." I mean, that's a major breakthrough, as far as I'm concerned. You know, this is real move forward. But if you think about the contributions that your mother has made, it's likely that some of the things she didn't do or did in some way that failed to support you in some of your category 1 efforts meant that from your point of view, she could have done better. In her category 2 projections. But still the fact is that you owe your life most empathetically to just one person. And this person is your mother. But very often the contribution of mothers is in the caring dimension. Also, it's such an early stage of one's life that one can't really keep track of everything that's going on. For one thing, you don't have concepts for doing so. It's great when you have a concept for keeping track of what's going on. But you can't apply that at the age of 6 months. You don't have the concepts. So therefore, as a result, it's possible that you not only do you overlook your mother's contribution regarding you, but you also overlook the entire category that she did exemplify de facto, in your case no less. And I mean, nothing wrong in looking with admiration with the players that make the goals. With ice hockey, Teemu Selänne, you know, the greatest of the great. When he started in NHL, he made more goals than anybody had done during the rookie season. Since then or after, you know, this is such a great player. But there are other ways in which people can be great and create value. And that's the dimension that I hope to highlight with this Timonen dimension. I mean, think about it this way, and let's close with this. I don't show it in entirety, but I just show a little part of it, and I'll do it without any voice. This is what happens every year. Somebody has won NHL. Now, when somebody wins NHL, so-called Stanley Cup is given to the captain of the team that won NHL. And there is the captain, number 19, young player, but charismatic. He's a real leader, you could say. But he's going to do what happens every year, which is the captain goes to pick up the cup. But in this case, he does also something that doesn't always happen. And what does, and this slight difference is that just as he moves on to go to pick up the cup, he waves to somebody, "Hey, come and join me." This is highly unlikely, an event, but you can do it. I mean, this is not such a formalistic event. It normally doesn't happen, but you could do it. If you're the kind of player, man, human being that sort of wants to see things beyond the obvious. So he's pointing to somebody, "Hey, come and join me." But to somebody, it's not his style. He doesn't want to overtly emphasize his role. And as a result, the captain goes alone. So notice again this kind of a situation that, you know, somebody's offered the ultimate spotlight, but you might not want to take the spotlight. This means that people that would have perhaps noticed your worth because of the spotlight don't see your worth. But somebody might be like that. You know, somebody wants to sort of do things his way, her way, which doesn't require the spotlight. So let's switch the lights and let's just sort of see this happening. A true leader is somebody who sees to that category, and it's an intellectual challenge. It's looking at the bigger picture challenge. When it comes to our self-leadership, it's going to towards those growth possibilities within us that might be less obvious, but whose logic is, and this is where I'd like to close, but whose logic is something that Barbara Fredrickson, whom I consider to be one of the greatest minds of our time when it comes to understanding the psychological dimension in us, in her what she calls broaden and build theory, or broaden and build framework, or broaden and build perspective on positive emotions, has highlighted as to be the key role of positive emotions. I mean, it's obvious that if you have a positive emotions, in some sense it's positive. So you sort of have the category 1 level benefit. You know, you experience hope, it's good. You experience interest, it's good. It's positive to experience interest or experience trust. But it could be that there are questions on your agenda, some goal makings of a particular kind, regarding which it could be that your positive emotions, while they are positive per se, don't really feed that much. You know, don't make that great passes. You know, of course you would seek out for them if the benefit would be sufficiently obvious from the point of view of the agenda that you need to carry out. But the way we could here perceive Fredrickson's overall perspective, and it's such a powerful perspective, I think, regarding positive emotions, when she says that they broaden and build our thought-action repertoire in the longer run. The catch is in the longer run. I mean, with young children, we are accustomed to waiting. So we feed the child's interest no matter what the subject is. Because we know this is the way a child builds himself, herself up. It's good if the child feels joyful doing whatever he or she is doing, because that gives energy on the run, feeling joyful. So with children, the benefits of positive emotions in the dimension Fredrickson calls broaden and build are obvious. But let's assume you are 22. I mean, you are 32, you are 62, you know, what's the benefit of positive emotions? The answer is category 3. But the category 3 is so difficult to envision, so difficult to conceptualize. But I hope that this little conceptualization, this line of reflection through this one ice hockey goal would help you to capture more vividly this I think crucial phenomenon of magnificent life. Thank you for your attention. Let's put a period there, and let's have a break. We have some coffee and tea again, and I'll continue in some 20 minutes. But thank you for your attention and focus. And please talk with some of your fellow students, and we have also people from outside the university here, people that you just happen to run into here from the Timonen dimension. Thank you very much. If you think about that case of my boys commenting on some of my behaviors and some of the patterns of my behaviors on that New Year's night, and Oliver concluding that, well, if you can make some headway in these two respects, that already would be a major breakthrough. Of course, it assumes that the breakthrough is possible. And if you start to work from that observation onwards, a breakthrough is possible. You can say, well, sometimes the breakthrough that you seek is one where you realize you need to find the appropriate path. That is, you need to find the appropriate level 2 or category 2 contribution that helps you to make the goal, that is the breakthrough. But if you study histories of actual breakthroughs, it turns out that there's so much that is something different as compared to just being straightforward, easily understandable, easily describable level 2 passes that then would have led or did lead to the breakthrough, whatever it was. So also in the dimension of breakthroughs, it seems to me that we would need to extend our thinking to allow for contributions that can't really perhaps be categorized. And that would perhaps then mean that you might want to facilitate within yourself your ability, your capability of receiving the contributions of category 3. And you know, there's so much research also that points to the benefits of openness. And also to the benefits of curiosity. That it would seem extremely strange. Why would anybody want to close that door? Surely it must be something that happens underneath the radar screen, so to say. But that also means that maybe then we need at least some openings, perhaps even some concepts with which to perhaps point ourselves to appreciating, let's say, openness or curiosity in our own case. Notice that the curiosity in its pure form isn't curiosity of X, of some particular X. It's just curiosity. It's as if a particular attitude. It's particular as the orientation. And surely to some extent one can facilitate that, using what seems so strong a strength with each of us, which is the use of our rational thinking, our system level capabilities, words, articulation. But to me it's so important that while we acknowledge that strength dimension, to at the same time appreciate the fact that as systems we are much more complex. That's only a subsystem. And we want to be intelligent with the whole of whatever we are as a system of systems. And in that sense, I mean, think about it this way. Here is a photograph that I believe saved my life. Of course, this is somewhat speculative, because when you have a complex event that is like anything complex, historically path dependent, there are all kinds of things that happened in the path that led to a particular situation underneath, let's say in this case, outside the Dipoli building of the Aalto University autonomy campus. But so you could say that, well, what's the role of this photo? What's the role of this image? What's the image anyway? Well, it's an image from 1981, from a situation where President Reagan, after 3 months at the office, has addressed some people at Washington's Hilton Hotel and is on his way to his limousine, which you can't see in the photo, but is to the right of the Secret Service agent in light blue suit. His position is at the back door of the presidential limousine. He has just opened the door. Now, what's going to happen in the next 2-3 seconds is that behind there you see press people. There's an umbrella under which there is, for instance, a TV camera. But there's also one guy with a pistol. The one guy with the pistol starts to shoot. And as the shots start to come, what happens is that the Secret Service agent on the right swings over to the direction where the shots seem to be coming from. And he spreads his legs and arms the wide way, which is, you could say, a highly counterintuitive thing to do. The intuitive thing to do is to make yourself smaller. But of course, with particular kind of training, you can train your mind, your body, to react in such a way that you do something that you wouldn't do intuitively or automatically. Probably in the split second as this happens, Agent McCarthy realizes the fact that he didn't put his bulletproof vest on in the morning. This is a routine gig. So, I mean, you don't want to wear those vests all the time. But in spite of that, he spreads his legs and arms the wide way. So basically what he does is that he fills the space you see there between him and President Reagan, forming a human shield. And it's that human shield that takes the bullet at the moment President Reagan is behind him, the human shield. He starts to go down, but meanwhile, the other agent in the white trench coat has grabbed President Reagan from behind and dives with him to the back seat of the waiting limousine, while you can hear some of the other agents shouting, "Get him out, get him out," and the limousine shoots off from the scene. This is in the next 2-3 seconds. It's you could say, very powerful demonstration of somebody putting himself on the line. And of course you could say putting yourself on the line is something that many people do appreciate when you think about it on the system 2 level, reflectively. Because you realize that very often the moment is so quick that if you haven't prepared yourself to putting yourself on the line, you won't end up putting yourself on the line when the moment emerges, because it's too quick to, as it were, reflect through there and then. You need to have done the reflection before the occasion. So putting yourself on the line, like, it could be that you are the captain of Chicago Blackhawks. You realize that, we might get tonight the cup. You're the captain. So you might run in your mind some of the thoughts. Of course, you want to have your mind focused on the game, but still, maybe on your way to the arena, you sort of allow yourself to reflect maybe the ceremony. And you come up with this idea that, that you're going to ask Kimmo to join you. Or it could be that you haven't thought about it. It's just that when the actual moment emerges, you realize, seeing there from the twinkle of from the corner of the eye, this great player, who doesn't get the spotlight, but you have seen, what the contribution is. It's magnificent. Most people don't appreciate it. So you there just put yourself online, doing this kind of thing that normally doesn't happen, but you do it. It's a theme that I've often approached through this this photo. It's to me a powerful photo. Now, Jaakko Korhonen has been my chief assistant for years. And Jaakko, of course, is also doing his PhD work on my methods. So he has thought about the kind of cognitive processes and also emotional processes that I aim and hope and try to facilitate that they would happen in the course of the lecture. And the chief of among those is this kind of associative thinking and sort of personalized thinking. Personalized, that you don't think about some case from the point of view of some kind of objective import of the case. Like in this case, for instance, you could approach this particular photo from the point of view of the question, how about those police officers? I mean, aren't they doing exactly what you are not supposed to do in this kind of situation, when they are looking at the person whom they are supposed to guard as opposed to the other direction? And I mean, you can pick up all kinds of objectival features out from that kind of photo or any photo. But you can also sort of think about yourself in a situation that is in some way similar. Suppose something would happen all of a sudden. How ready are you if the occasion would be there? It's a possible thought. And well, there is Jaakko. And I'm, or was at the time, 61 of age. I'm not that physical. Jaakko isn't that physical either. But when the moment arose, Jaakko was ready. When you have a situation where somebody takes you by surprise by stabbing you all of a sudden, you can say, there's not that much time to sort of think regarding what to do. Just like, somebody starts to shoot all of a sudden, then it probably is about, it's about milliseconds. And although you, in principle, know what you're supposed to do, maybe you do it just 1 millisecond too late. But Jaakko wasn't 1 millisecond late. you could say, well, how can you make such a claim? I said, well, I'm not really making a claim. I'm sort of describing basically a possibility. Maybe this started from the point of view of Jaakko and his mental processes, his emotional processes. Maybe the photograph started as a kind of level 2 contribution. Maybe contributing to some particular moment. But maybe it then started to become a level 3 contribution, making possible on some kind of subconscious level things. Well, we don't know what the logic there was, but what we do know is that in actual life, Jaakko reacted immediately. Jaakko reacted in a way that helped me to help me, in a way that in that kind of situation doesn't happen automatically, because it could be that you deny the facts. But Jaakko was so sharp and also so unhesitating in his support to me there on that occasion, that I had the courage to seize the knife with my right hand, where I happened to have a glove. So it was technically possible to grab the knife by the blade. And then I managed to hold on to it also as we fell down. And Jaakko jumped on top of him there and then. So given the fact that Jaakko is here, so let me suggest that we would give an applause for the good job. This being one of the themes I like quite a lot, from the point of view of this micro change perspective, this idea of changing something very, very small. Of course, thinking is something that in some sense is small to change. You just change from one thought to another thought. You just change from thinking about the theme of me as somewhat moody, as somebody who perhaps could grow in the dimension of my moodiness. It's a little change in thinking, but also in terms of what actually happens. You could say, most of us men feel that in our intimate relationships, we don't really get the credit from our point of view we deserve. Of course, the lady also probably feels the same. She doesn't get the credit she deserves. But from the man's point of view, this getting the credit thing is particularly emphasized due to the fact that very often it's something so obvious and so small that why is she holding back the giving of the credit? And typically the answer to this question, why is she holding back the giving of the credit, is because there are other things still to be done. So this is one possible reason why you might hold back the giving of the good job kind of acknowledgement of whatever happened, because there are still other things to do. Or it could be that it's sort of irritating, it only now happened, as opposed to 2 months ago. So he might have come as they're too late in doing the something. Or it could be that there's something you want to sort of point out isn't really up to the standard. So there could be all kinds of reasons for holding back the good job statement. But suppose you would give the good job statement with the full period. I mean, this is possible. Even when it came relatively late, even when it could have gone earlier, even when there are other things still to do, you still could say, hey, that's a good job. And stop there. It's to me really amazing. Why would people not want to acknowledge the good things that happen around them? And here I come back to something we discussed in the last lecture, I think, what I called systems of holding back. The system of holding back is where you primarily feel that yes, you could give a credit to, let's say, your special man or your special lady regarding something, but given the fact that the account books show this favoritism in his or her favor to be so strong, that is, she should really move first, or he, creates a situation where everybody is holding back. This, I believe, is the case in human life. People are holding back what would benefit everybody. And you might say, well, how about just thinking? I mean, surely people could just at least think alternatives that might not be obvious, might not be there immediately to be picked up, but the person would allow himself or herself to sort of use imagination, let's say, or look in some other field, some other type of system context as compared to where his or her life takes place. And look at things, how are things there? I'm not the dancer myself. How are things with dancers? Or I don't sing in a chorus, but how do people that do sing in chorus relate to one another? It's a possible question. So you explore what it means to be a human being in a different kind of context as compared to those that happen to be your context. It's quite possible. Turns out people hold back. Because your overall feeling is likely to be that you're already now held back so much with all kinds of little things that you have a hard time just to sort of make it given the circumstances, as opposed to thinking perspectives from a different revenue and just doing it. I mean, I think you have a hard time in claiming to yourself that you couldn't just this evening send a text message to your father saying that, thank you, Father, for X. And surely your father must have done a good job in something. Not to speak about your mother or your grandparents, or there's a host of people that have contributed to whatever we right now in our parts. Couldn't you just do it? I mean, this theme of just doing is to me really amazing. I mean, think about it from a still stronger perspective, as follows. When our boys were small, one of the things that more and more started to irritate me, was the fact that particularly when we traveled, and we would travel regularly because of the fact that the special lady at that time was still working for Finnair. But at that time, in the early 90s, throughout the 90s basically, Finnair didn't really fly that often to long destination targets. So Finnair would fly, let's say, twice a week to Tokyo. But this meant that typically the crew stayed in, let's say, Tokyo or Beijing, Singapore for a few days. But also traveling wasn't so usual as it's now. So that also meant that it was fairly easy to get on board with so-called ID tickets. The ID ticket is a great ticket in terms of not costing that much, but the catch is you might get thrown out. Should somebody pay more? Which of course nowadays can happen in the last minute because of the booking system that has developed so much. So people can buy a ticket at a very late hour, but in the old days this wasn't the case. So you knew pretty well if you would have space for Esa and the twin boys, let's say, on a particular flight to Beijing. So we would travel quite a lot. Also, I wasn't so busy in those days. So we did travel quite a bit. But before traveling to wherever we went, this kind of mode activated in her that started to be more and more irritating as far as I'm concerned, because she seemed to over-organize the whole thing. I mean, do we really have to think about all kinds of, situations that might emerge, as opposed to focusing upon what's likely to happen? I mean, it was really incredible. I was typically, of course, in the cabin with the boys. And there were all kinds of sort of special requirements imposed upon me. For instance, we would always have in my cabin bag extra clothing for the boys, in case the boys, when eating something or drinking something, would pour something on them, with the result that the shirt would get wet, and there would be a need to sort of change the shirt. So I would have the cabin bag, and in the cabin bag there would be these extra clothes for the boys, but the extra clothes in the cabin bag wouldn't be just there loosely sort of around, they would be in a plastic bag. So that in case also the cabin bag would be in that place where that Coke or water would get poured, so they wouldn't get wet. But the plastic bag wouldn't be just any old plastic bag, it would have to be a transparent plastic bag, so that you can find the clothes with optimal speed. This was the special lady making arrangements. When from my point of view, it would have been quite enough to check that you have your Visa card, you have your toothbrush, that's about it. And I mean, it was clear to me that she was really over-organizing. I mean, objectively over-organizing. But as I said, I've been for years excited about this photograph. And there's another great photo of the same situation. It's just maybe 10 seconds from this one, where one of the agents has thrown out his Israeli-made Uzi submachine gun. So he's with his Uzi there sort of controlling the scene. So I've been studying these photographs, for years and years, very excited. So once when I was studying them, I all of a sudden realized what Pipsa's behaviors amounted to. When I perceived that she clearly is the head of the Secret Service of our family. And in that mode, you need to prepare. And you need to prepare for, all kinds of imaginative possibilities. Something might happen. And then if that something would happen, you are already ready because you have thought about it in advance. Also, it means that, your mode of speaking very often to just, one of the regular agents is likely to be somewhat, you could say, in the military mode. You have the operation is going on. You don't have the time to explain to a given agent some of the details why you are giving an order. Because the limousines will be here in 20 seconds. So I mean, you have to operate the situation on, so the Secret Service head, when talking to some of the agents, is likely to sort of just order the agents to do X, is how she spoke to me. And you can understand that because, from her point of view, the operative situation was on. And it really is amazing when you think about it. This really is just a micro change in my way of thinking. A woman who over-organizes is negativity aversive. She emphasizes unduly the negative aspects of the situation. And then think about her as the head of the Secret Service of our family. This does make a difference. So it's this kind of shift in thinking that I think is there for us all the time. But this possibility is likely to become fed by what you have there in your category 3 dimension. If you have more imagery to draw from, you're more likely to come up with the imagery that would help you to move ahead in a given situation, as compared to just having a few basic categories there. I think is one reason why it's a great idea to, for instance, read books without really knowing what they would contribute to. You just don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to assign the significance of what you are reading to something that is there right now going on. But you allow your system to be one that can be fed by all kinds of openings that then lurk there for decades, and then all of a sudden come into fruition in a situation that is totally distinct from where it originally started from, but they are still in sync. There is this kind of harmony now between you and the situation that wouldn't have been there had you not had that little plan put in place perhaps years previously. Is a possibility that we have. Now this sort of overall scheme of things is one where I'm personally reminded of something that happened. This is already must be more than 20 years ago. When somebody said to me in the context of a lecture that, Esa, you've read so much, you know so many interesting people, there must be somebody who's particularly inspiring from your personal point of view. And it immediately struck, yes, there is somebody who is particularly exciting from my personal point of view, from the point of view of sort of living one's life and engaging in situations is particularly, from my point of view personally, useful to think about from the philosophical perspective, and that's 007. I mean, if you think about the beginning of the film Moonraker, what happens there is that 007 falls out of an airplane without a parachute. If you ask, is 007 irritated when falling out of an airplane without a parachute, keeping in mind the fact that this is somewhat an irritating situation on the average? The answer is, of course not. Instead of getting irritated, 007 goes on to analyze the situation, paying particular attention to the question, are there any other objects flying around at this hour? Only to observe after an analysis that in fact there seems to be one guy with a parachute a couple of 100 meters down, so 007 stretches his ankles to the optimal flying position and starts to curve towards the guy. Which clearly means that if we think about the 007 philosophy, point number one is 007 doesn't get irritated. No matter what the situation, 007 doesn't get irritated. Now, looking back, I'm just describing how it was. Looking back, the stabbing situation, it's amazing to recall the fact, and this really is my subjective feeling, to recall the fact that I didn't get agitated, there was no fear, it wasn't, I didn't feel threatened. I mean, emotion-wise, it was incredibly sort of flat an experience. And basically it was just tremendous concentration on a task. But it didn't go up and down, emotion-wise. And I mean, if you look at 007, in any of the 007 films, most of the time when he is on the mission, it's emotion-wise pretty much the same all the time. And you could say, well, isn't that a good idea if whatever you need to do is highly context sensitive? Because if it's highly context sensitive, then you have to find in that situation whatever is, from your point of view, positive and helps you to move forward in that particular situation. So point number one in 007 philosophy, 007 doesn't get irritated. I mean, I have gone through this philosophy. I sort of love it. It's kind of childish. It's maybe it is that it resonates with my 5-year-old. I don't know the reason, but I really love this sort of way of thinking somehow. For years and years and years. If one asks, well, is that perhaps one reason, Esa, why you are alive? I would say, well, it's possible. At least if I would think of the alternative of not having thought about 007 philosophy, not having sort of lectured about it globally in various places, sort of going into it time and again. So clearly erasing all that is something I really wish wouldn't have happened, because I'm pretty confident it would have affected the actual performance there and then. Immediate action. You see this very clearly in the film GoldenEye towards the end, where 007 and the leading Bond lady find the chief villain's headquarters, and there's this huge satellite antenna. But as they find the huge satellite antenna, the army of the chief villain open fire, and 007 and the leading Bond lady start to slide on the surface of the satellite antenna with increasing speed to the center. And it seems that they are going to get crushed in the center given the speed, but in the last possible moment, 007 is able to stop the slide, and he also able to save Bond lady. And as this happens, it's important to observe what 007 doesn't do. Because what 007 doesn't do is that he would say, oh, that was a close one. Let's stop here and start to imagine, all the horrible things that could have happened. That's not the 007 approach. He looks into the whole stairway. This is where we continue. It's the immediate continuation that I've seen so seldom to happen. This is amazing in organizational life. I've given hundreds of lectures. I suppose, like in any profession, some of the lectures in a particular place have somehow resonated better with a given audience than in some other place. But all in all, I would say that, and I hope you don't find me sort of boasting about something. I believe I'm just describing the fact that almost all my lectures have been pretty successful. So, as a sort of reflection of that, it's not so surprising if somebody comes after the lecture, I'm Vice President so-and-so. This was really good, Esa. In fact, you took me by surprise. I didn't expect so much from it. This really made my thinking to move, and, this kind of people-related themes, they're important. Here's my card. Why don't you contact our HR? Now, I respect HR function in organizations very, very much. It's a tight thing to do, because you are sort of between business and between the people that they are on the front line. It's very, very tough very often. I respect very much what they are doing. But if you ask, well, will I call the HR of the given company, say regards from this whoever it was, the answer is, well, I don't call there. And the reason why I don't call there is because of the fact that you can't imagine that 007 calls up places asking, is there some work available? There's also a certain self-respect that is involved. I mean, you don't have to take it, it's okay. I think it's very important to develop a kind of from inside conviction regarding whatever you are doing regarding its worth. Now, sometimes you can ask somebody, do you think this is valuable? Sort of like the category 2. But if you have full understanding or some kind of deeper understanding what we are doing, you don't really need the category 2 to tell you that what you are doing is valuable. But that means that you are able to look into the category 3 dimensions regarding what you are doing. Style. In Bond, style, of course, is also quite conspicuous in terms of how he dresses. There are all kinds of, you could say, small details where this shows, for instance, just yesterday to get myself in the right mode, I watched as a sort of warming up. I'm not going to show it, but I just looked as a kind of warming up the opening scene from Spectre, and it's quite a scene. I mean, the whole opening thing, and Bond is there. You know, a building falls on top of him, and he's fighting in a helicopter, and above the main square in Mexico City, and all this time he has his suit, which you can tell is, you know, it's a very, very well-tailored suit. It's bottomed up. So the bottom doesn't, you know, become loose at any given moment. You want to have style when fighting in a helicopter above the main square in Mexico City, for instance, is the point here. But from your point of view and our point of view, what this means, I think, is the fact that, you know, there are so many things that, of course, our micro change possibilities extend to, such as the framing you use for some particular familiar phenomenon that being illustrated by the Pips as the head of Secret Service in our family example, or you picking up some psychological aggregate for some pattern of your behaviors by asking somebody nearby, what do you think are some of my key weaknesses? And then sort of maybe figuring out what might be some of the steps forward. But when it comes to style, you know, this is an external thing. It's going to change anyway. Nobody keeps his or her clothing exactly the same all the time. It's impossible. Also because how other people perceive your clothing, even if it is physically the same, is going to change. So the way we make our hair, whatever it is, the way we say hello to somebody, there are all kinds of things that relate to just the way we externally come across to other people, regarding which you will have a hard time to claim you wouldn't have a choice. But some of the choices from your point of view, given your whole system, will be more sort of in resonance with something deeper. You know, for some reason you like some way of doing the something. Like for some reason I like doing courses that are not compulsory to anybody. I like it. And I like this sort of feeling of freedom. Like this particular course, I could do or I could not do equally well because I'm already, in terms of what I have to do, doing enough. So it's just completely extra. I like to have, for a given lecture, a title like Good Vibrations. I somehow just like it. So you could say, well, it's my style. I do it this way, you know, if I can't do it this way, I won't do it at all. For some reason, I get something for the effort because we are here at Design Factory. I like to be here at Design Factory. Okay, so style as something that is in some sense part of the content is 007 philosophy point number 4. Now, let me illustrate this idea still slightly differently. I mean, you could say that with Bond, he has this sort of secret things that are amazingly productive for particular tasks. So it could be a pointer, which is the kind of pointer that if you push it in some particular way, out comes a missile. So you know, it's good to have such a pointer in Bond's business because of the sort of special requirements for success conditions in his case. But if you think about yourself, surely there are all kinds of things that happened to you, let's say, in your youth? You know, some star moments, let's say, in high school, that if you're absolutely honest, even to this day, you sort of hear the sort of good job, period, statement. Although you know rationally that it wasn't that big a thing. It's just that for you it was a big thing. And what that one gymnastic teacher who was there just for a few times said to you after some class is the way we are constituted in our experience dimension. That certain things are for some reason energizing. Like in my case, in the old days, as I said, I traveled quite a bit with Pipsa, the special lady. So for instance, there was one time I returned with her in the crew bus towards JFK in New York. And the captain in command said to me, Esa, would you be interested to come to the cockpit for the takeoff? And I said, that would be really great. Is that possible? Yeah, sure, it's great. It's possible. Come there. So sure enough, there I'm in the cockpit as we are taxiing there. And I'm looking at these two pilots there. I'm seated right after them, but there is sort of a lift in the seat that I'm using that makes it possible for me to sort of look over their shoulders quite well. It's a great experience. Then we come to the end of the runway. We get the final permit to take off. The captain picks up the microphone and announces to the cabin, we are now ready for takeoff. Cabin attendants, please be seated. Then he adjusts his seat just a little bit. They look into one another, and then he starts to push the accelerator up as the co-pilot is announcing some key parameters, and then he takes this huge aircraft up. It's really a great experience to witness. And to me, it as an experience, is loaded with plus charged energy that I can perhaps bring to a situation where I need plus charged energy. Secretly. I mean, somebody can, for instance, in his or her mind, cite a poem. Apparently, this is what Nelson Mandela did. He cited a poem, and this, for some reason, gave him strength. It was his secret weapon. A human being is this kind of a creature for whom this kind of, you could say, mysterious-looking stuff is possible, but you don't have to activate it. The Bahama Principle. The Bahama Principle says that as bond follows leads, sooner or later he's going to end up in a place he didn't expect to land up at. And it turns out to be quite a bigger case than anticipated. In fact, there's a crazy billionaire who's about to blow up London in about 7 minutes. And given the army that is protecting him, this would require a major operation from special forces to handle. But the bad news is you don't have time to get the special forces to the spot. This is bad news. The good news is you are there. And you are ready for the occasion. This is, you could say, philosophy of responsibility. You just take care of the case. This is the Bahama Principle. You don't ask, is this fair? Who should be here? Why did this happen? You just sort of take the case and handle the case. I'm here reminded of one of my favorite Finnish CEOs, one that I admire so much, Matti Alahuhta. I once asked him, when something goes wrong, what do you do? And Matti said, well, when something goes wrong, the first thing one needs to do is to find out what exactly has happened, as opposed to what somebody believes has happened, or somebody claims has happened, or somebody fears has happened. You find out what actually has happened. Now, in order for you to find out what actually has happened, it's good if you have already made a relationship with the key people to be such that people actually do not fear to tell you what actually has happened. So that you don't lose time in trying to figure out what has happened, because the person already tells what from his or her point of view did happen. Because it's easy for you to tell it even when the news is negative. So this is again value dimension 3. So you had made possible for somebody, when the going gets rough, to tell you, hey, this is how it actually has gone. And while you are finding out what actually has happened, you also at the same time figure out, given that this is what has happened, what's the best movement forward? What shall we do now, given that this is what has happened? In particular, what you don't do is that you don't find anybody to blame. You don't sort of think, why did this happen that has happened happen? You just want to find out what has happened, but given that this is what has happened, what's the best movement forward? This is the Bahama Principle. And the last one is 007 is in His Majesty's Secret Service. Now, this is fairly easy to interpret literally as a reference to the party that has hired Bond. But I would say this is too literal. Throughout this course, we have tried to exercise, you could say, associative thinking. We have tried to sort of look at things from the point of view of, hey, there's a structure, but maybe that structure could exist somewhere else some of the time. So this kind of transferability of structures thinking has been what we have used all along. So you could say, well, 007 is in Her Majesty's Secret Service. Well, what that might mean, if you sort of look at it more broadly, you could say, well, there's a majesty. Or perhaps in the plural, majesties that 007 serves. You might not know it because it's in his heart. So he is in Her Majesty's Secret Service. But this means that if he has to fight the former 006, who knows all the tricks that Bond knows, but doesn't have the majesties, Bond has an advantage. So if I here think about what we have here tried to do, one way to think about what we have here tried to do is that we have tried to create here a context, kind of a campfire at which a person could reflect upon his or her majesties. Now, some of the majesties might be fairly easy to pinpoint, but some might be more such that you need to have your emotional touch or sync or resonance with the something established, rather than it being nameable in objectival terms. Once there was a discussion on the subject of parenthood, during the intermission of which one lady said to me, this was surprising given the context, but she said to me, Esa, do you have dreams? And it struck me, given the fact that it was parenthood that was being discussed, I said, yes, in fact, I do have a dream. And the dream is quite personal. It's the following. One day, Pipsa, my special lady, and me are walking on Boulevardi. This is the street where we've been living for decades. So we are walking there and we are 80. And we are on our way to Cafe Egberg. You know, we've gone there so many times. That's where our first date was at. And we are walking towards Cafe Egberg. It's just the next block from where we live. And we are walking there at the age of 80 in order to meet our twin boys. And it's, let's say, Friday. It's maybe 4:15. But given the fact that our boys know that their mother doesn't want to sit in all of the tables, there are certain tables she prefers. One of the boys have come well in advance
in order to secure one of those tables. Maybe it's the one where daddy sat in the corner when mommy came and told him, we have twins. And daddy thought, that's a disaster. Some of the tables she prefers. So given the fact that you are going to meet your parents, and you know that your mother prefers some tables over some other tables, she doesn't want to sit there in the middle. She doesn't want to be stared at. So you have secured one of the tables. And we approach the table. Sure enough, there are the boys. And as we approach the table, what happens is that the boys stand up. After this, the other one of the boys helps the overcoat of her mother. And we sit down. This is the dream. I mean, in some sense, if you think about majesties, what could are majesties that don't show in your everyday? That's a question. But in order to get ourselves in sync, to get our resonance going, the good vibrations with the things that we, intellectually speaking, believe in, really to play the harmonies they could, we need to find in the situations in which our life takes place, the resonance. Now, let me say this using one final example. This is to me such a powerful example. I think I've, for instance, concluded all my Prof seminars with this particular example. That came to my notice in the early 90s when I came to know the Finnish Rally driver Ari Vatanen. He's a world champion from 81, one of the all-time greats. But in the early 90s, his rallying career was still continuing, but it was the eve of his rallying career. But I came to know him because his special lady was an old friend of Pipsa's. They both used to work for Finnair. So I came to know him through her. And it was very exciting because I had already paid attention to the phenomenon, which is quite universal amongst my friends, which is that just like me, my friends are amazing guys because they have been able somehow to get women that are really, several layers ahead of the guys, just like me. And I mean, I might say something of Pipsa the special lady, but if you do actually meet Pipsa the special lady, if you are there, within that magical circle of her warmth, you know that anything Esa said wasn't really up to what Pipsa actually is. That's what I would say real people are like. You might describe the person, but when the person is there, in the dimension of human warmth, in the dimension that truly counts, in the dimension of the Timonen category we described, words are feeble. So we met the Vatanens and they came to our place. Our boys were at the time, I think, 3. My mother was there. We had an evening off. And it made quite an impression on me when the first thing, when we came to our place in the evening, was that the rally champion wanted to see our boys that were sleeping. Now, if you look at your children when they are sleeping, if you look at any children when they are sleeping, I think what you perceive is the upscale register of life, the miracle of life, and the fact how vulnerable that scale is. I mean, it's a number of things that we can get done roughly. Many functionalities don't require subtleties. You don't have to be sensitive. You just sort of target particular outcomes. You can get those particular outcomes even if people to some extent are crushed. But if you want to have the best you can have, then you need to be subtle, then you need to be sensitive. Is the phenomenon, I believe, you perceive when you see a child sleeping. When a child is not sleeping, the energy of the child mesmerizes you and hypnotizes you. You're not sort of captured by this, I think, fundamental observation of the upscale register of life along with the vulnerability of that register. Then we started to talk, and Ari is such a colorful guy. He's from Karelia, you know, the eastern part of Finland, and he's such a great guy. It was from him that I got this idea that it's a great idea to shake hands with people. Because Ari is excited to shake hands. So I started thinking, hey, could I shake hands with people? Yeah, well, it's a seminar, 20 people, surely I can do it. But let's say it's a lecture, let's say 50 people, surely it's still possible. But how about 500 people? It is possible. So this is how I started it. Anyway, so we started to talk, and Ari was there talking about his world championship as a young driver. His nearly a fatal accident in the Argentina rally, his Paris-Dakar victories. He's such a colorful guy who's there talking. But then he said, one of the biggest moments of my rallying career, however, took place right here in Finland. Of course, it's a rally, the Finnish Rally. I mean, we Finnish drivers, we love it. And some of the stages, I mean, they're legendary. And it's so fast. It's such a delightful rally to drive, you know, those dirt roads. They're in the beautiful Finnish countryside. So I've come to know so many people over the years. And in those days, the service places of the teams were there in the countryside. So you didn't come to any fixed one location, but you fixed the car along the way, and you had just agreed with some particular country houses, for instance, where your team could come to the yard to operate. So I said, I've come to know so many people over the years. But there was one particular family I came to know near the stage of Myhimpää. Because the house of the family was very close to the road, and they had two sons that were in wheelchairs, always watching us in the rally itself, but also during the testing time, by a post box. So there were the boys, and one year, for instance, I agreed with the other top drivers to stop by the boys during the testing that we were there doing, and give autographs to the boys. So there was this sort of queue of rally cars to these two boys in wheelchairs. It's an astonishing sight if you think about it there in the Finnish countryside. But then one year I said, when I was testing, I didn't see the boys. And just sort of observed that they were not there, but you know, that's possible for whatever reason. Then in the rally itself, we had a testing, we had a service place close by the house of the boys, so I came to the service place, got out from the car, but there were villagers watching us, so I went to talk with the villagers, how's it going? Hey, I didn't see Kimmo and Pasi as I was testing out. How are they doing? And the villagers say, haven't you heard, Ari? Haven't you heard that Kimmo and Pasi are dead? Both of them died last year. They had an MS disease where your muscles collapse gradually, which had taken its final toll. First, the one son had died, and then the other one. The boys were dead, but the rally continues. So I said I went back to the car and started to drive towards the stage. But before you come to the stage itself, when you drive just among ordinary traffic, there is the house of the boys. And as I near the house, I see from a distance that this time there's just one lonely figure. By the post box. And this one lonely figure is the father of the boys. So Ari said, I thought this is a man I cannot pass by. So he comes in the rally car, stops by the father. I mean, if you imagine this situation, it's beautiful Finnish countryside, but you know, it's not really that wealthy. There's that house very close to the road, and there is the father, you know, and very often these Finnish men from the countryside, they are not, you know, men of words. You can imagine this meeting. and maybe silently the father, as it were, saying, thanks a lot, Ari, for stopping. You can say that even if you don't say anything. Thanks a lot, Ari, for stopping. Thanks a lot for those postcards that you would occasionally send to the boys. And particularly what you did during the rally when you would drive here and from the rally car wave to the boys. As their friend, it always gave so much strength. But now that the boys are gone, I would have the final request, which is if you could this year on that next stage dedicate your driving to the memory of my two boys. Well, the father started to cry. Ari said, I started myself to cry hysterically. We left the crying father. We came to the starting line, maybe a couple of kilometers from where we had met the father, me still crying, with my Swedish co-driver. If you imagine this rally car there at the start line, this huge engine roaming, the seconds counting, and the world champion crying hysterically. It's an incredible thought. Ari said we were driving with Mitsubishi, but the Mitsubishi with which we were driving wasn't really competitive. So we were not competing for victory. But as the moment to go came, I knew what I had to do. And I somehow reached that higher level which is possible for human beings to sometimes to reach. And I did the best time on that stage as a gesture of honor to those two boys. This is one of the finest moments of my rallying career. Now somebody could say, okay, Esa, that's impressive. That's, in fact, when I think about it, pretty much what I would myself do if I would be a world-class rally driver. In that everyday of a world-class rally driver, I wouldn't allow the various details, various surface defects that come along in any context to take me down in human terms, but would keep my eyes open to the little contributions I can make to other people, also in those dimensions that you call the Timonen dimension, the third dimension, where you don't really have any gain yourself to whatever you do. You just sort of maybe sort of make something possible. You seed something. Is exactly what I would do myself if my everyday would be the everyday of a world-class rally driver. It's a possible way to think. But one would say, well, it doesn't really sound very plausible, because what somebody is isn't really a function of the everyday of that particular kind where the life seems to take place, but it's more a function of what the person is, vis-a-vis the context of his or her life. But that is something that is not going to happen in the upscale terms or in the sort of majestic terms if the person hasn't thought about the majesties and had found ways to be in sync with those majesties vis-a-vis what the situations might be. So it's that kind of good vibration that isn't up to the environment, but is primarily up to you. That I hope that our reflections in this space have facilitated in your case, and which I hope will continue. Well, this is the way I see it ever after, to the benefit of you yourself and to the benefit of those that you love. Thank you very much.
This course has been truly amazing, and it's hard to believe that the lectures are now over. How do you feel about all of this after the last lecture?
Well, I'm very happy of the way this emerged and of having had the privilege of standing there in front of the orchestra and hearing those melodies come out, I think in many ways so purely and in also with emphasis that in some subtle ways I think brought new light to one's understanding of the themes. It's this kind of appreciative, caring context that we created together, in which the lines of thought that I tried to articulate came just the way they came, and had that kind of resonance that I feel so happy that I had the honor of serving this whole the way it now materialized.
That's very beautifully said, like serving. The standing uploads today were also quite something, and I think that shows that we did actually create like very special something here together. How did you feel about that?
I was very touched by the applause. It's in this kind of fairly intimate context. It's also a context where I can actually see people's eyes getting wet if it happens, and it did happen at places. I didn't dare to look that closely at places because I didn't want to disturb the flow. But if I think about these 4 lectures put together, and of course now done for the first time in English and being captured in video form, I think extremely well in terms of the approach, in terms of the, well, quote unquote method. I'm so happy that we've documented this, because the phenomena that we've tried to facilitate, and I felt we did facilitate, are so valuable, and they come from within us as human beings when forming an appropriate kind of cultivating flourishing environment or thinking environment or platform, campfire for magnificent thought for the benefit of magnificent life.
Thank you for taking yourself to a next level again, Esa, and doing this in English, because I think quite many people are glad that they can actually now reach your lectures and enjoy them in YouTube and everywhere. So thank you so much.
Thanks Ida for those words. It's been great to have you here by my side.
Of course, always. Thank you.